Ahoy! Welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself some tea, and let's get started. This is the third and final part of my favorite queer book series. Last time we looked at my favorite books with trans and non-binary characters, and today we'll be looking at my favorite queer books with Ace and Poly and etc. characters. Mostly Ace and Poly. A little bit of bi. Ace and Poly with a side of bi, if you would. So, let's get into it. First off, I'm going to... the first one is Let's Talk About Love by Kann. This is a new adult contemporary romance. We follow Alice. Alice is a young woman in college, and Alice has her whole summer planned out until her girlfriend unexpectedly breaks up with her over Alice being asexual. At this point, Alice completely gives up on dating because she feels like she will never be understood. That is, until she meets and befriends a new coworker who has her questioning whether it is worth it to risk their friendship over a love that might not be reciprocated and might not even be understood. So from the description, you can probably tell that Alice is biromantic, asexual. And I don't read a lot of romance books. I don't think I read any romance books that aren't classics or written by Jane Austen, actually. But I really like this one. This is the first book, or not even just book, the first anything that I read or watched or saw that made me feel seen as an ace person. I really like that it dove into aesthetic attraction and how that's different from romantic and sexual attraction. And I really connected with the dread that Alice feels at having to explain herself to new partners and the fear of being rejected based on something that you have no control over. I will say that Alice's love interest, whose name is Takumi, is a little too perfect. It became a little bothersome at times, but and some of the other characters are also a little exaggerated. But other than that, I think it's a really fun read, especially if you are ace or you know someone who is ace. Next up is Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. This is a historical retelling / science fiction. It is a sci-fi retelling of China's first and only, I believe, Empress Wu Zetian. In this version, there is an alien species, an alien invader species, who attack just outside of the Great Wall of China. And in order to combat them, they created chrysalises, which are these giant mecha robots. And a chrysalis is piloted by two pilots, one male who controls the chrysalis, and one female concubine pilot whose chi energy is used to fuel the chrysalis, essentially. And most concubine pilots end up dying from the mental strain. Wu Zetian volunteers to be a concubine pilot in order to avenge the death of her sister, but during her first battle, she discovers that she is what's called an Iron Widow, meaning that she can use the male pilot's chi energy and sacrifice him instead. This book makes the list because there is a prominent poly relationship, and at least two of the main characters are bisexual to boot. It's not often you see poly representation, let alone good poly representation, so that's exciting. This is also just one of my favorite books, so I'm contractually obligated to myself to talk about it anytime I can. But I will be talking about this book in an upcoming video, so I won't say too much more, other than to say that I loved it so much that as soon as the author started making merch, I bought one. I bought this little pin. It's a little non-binary butterfly, and I love it so much. Almost as much as I love this book. Next up we have, I forgot my tea. Next up we have Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Bowman. This is a YA contemporary. This follows a teenager named Rumi who is sent off to live with her aunt in Hawaii following the death of her younger sister. And the story follows her as she learns to process her grief and navigate her life without her sister. On top of all that, Rumi is also coming to terms with her sexuality. She doesn't know exactly what label fits her, if any of them do, but she's definitely on the Ace spectrum. In the Ace spectrum? There were a lot of really achingly beautiful things in this book about grief and forgiveness, and also just about figuring out who you are, and more specifically about figuring out who you are as an asexual. I really like this one line from the book, so I'm gonna read it. Because feeling the way I feel always felt normal to me until I realized it wasn't what other people were doing. Which to me really sums up my own personal experience with asexuality. Everyone will have different experiences, so nothing is universal. But for me, I had a literal light bulb moment in high school where I realized that I was experiencing things very differently from everyone else around me. And it can be very isolating and very confusing. And I didn't have the vocabulary for it at the time. Rumi does. Rumi knows what asexuality is, and aromanticism and gray romanticism and the whole the whole kettle of fish. But she is still unsure of exactly where she falls, and she's trying to navigate that on top of all these other things that are happening in her life. I do have some problems with this novel, just about plot things and character things, but I'll talk about that in another video. But I did really enjoy this book, and I recommend it to anyone, especially fellow aces. Fellow aces. I really love this pin too. This is from Ace+Poly. Maybe I'll leave a link to their store in my bio, or not my bio, in the description, because I really like them. And we have one honorable mention, which is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This is a YA fantasy. It is an African-inspired fantasy. I talked about it in a pretty recent video, so I won't go into it too much. But I'll just say that there is a main character who is Ace, although it's not a main part of the story, kind of at all. And it's elaborated a little bit more so in the sequel. There are also a few characters in here who are bi, and that's also pretty cool. And the series on the whole is also very good, and it's here because I really enjoy this series, and then also it has some representation, so it gets an honorable mention, and you should check it out if it sounds at all interesting to you. And that's a wrap on the Pride series for this year. Thank you so much for checking them out, and fear not, I read queer books all throughout the year, so you'll still be hearing about them. I just wanted to put a little bit more focus on them since it's the month of the gays. Let me know what you thought about these books down in the comments, and as always, if you have any recommendations, I would be more than happy to look at them. Find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess. Find my little mini store over there too at Moonlit Cat Creations, or go directly to the website moonlitcatcreations.com. We're having a month-long Pride sale, so get it while it lasts. And if you like what I do, you can also tip me on coffee, but no pressure, just good vibes. Stay cozy.